Bird, 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 bird. Get him. Yeah! Ron Babe was right. Ron Babe was right.
I'm feeling spry. Hey everybody, it's Ron Bain with the Hunting Dog Podcast. Let's drop the gate. I like that. Let's drop the gate. You know, drop the tailgate. Let's get this show on the road. On X Hunt. Well, honestly, I've flat out ran out of things to think about to tell you that you can do with your OnX Hunt app on your phone. But I will tell you what I did yesterday. My neighbor Tuck, who is I would call him an amateur logger, young kid, works like kids you don't ever see working at 15 years of age. He's been cleaning up my woods, and he come back to me yesterday, and he says, hey, Ron, there's a couple of dead trees out there just beyond where the loggers took your oaks out last year. And he said, I don't know if they're on your property or Chuck's next door. So what did we do? Exactly. Found out that one of them was on my property. Found out that one of them was on my neighbor's property. Right on the line. But we followed our little blue dot out there. And then, of course, Tuck's got to call the neighbor up and see if he can have that dead tree. He can have my tree. This kid's 15 years old, and he has his own portable sawmill already. Yeah, that's one of them kids that we need. We need more of. And we need more people to have OnX. Well, I don't even know if we could have more people that would have OnX. Anyway, if you don't have it, you need it. You can go to you can use the code HTP20 to get 20% off your elite course, or you could look on the back of a box of Cheerios. They probably have a 20% off on there too, or it doesn't matter. Just get it before next season, okay? Just like you should get your Pike gear before next season. But until you buy your Pike gear, the 24th of May, what is that? The 24th of May. That's Wednesday. Wednesday, the 24th of May, brought to you by Pike Gear. They're going to have their YouTube Live Birds and Brews again in conjunction with the Rough Grouse Society and American Woodcock Society. So I'm going to be on there answering some questions. I'm going to stump a few people with some trivia questions. And the special guest will be Dr. Ben Jones. He is the CEO of Rough Grouse Society. You've heard him on my podcast. I've hunted with him in the past. You want to talk about there's just nothing. There's nothing this man does not know about the flora and fauna of the grouse woods. He lived with the grouse. He's like Jane Goodall, lived with the lions, in Africa, that goofy one. Well, Ben lived with grouse for his working on his thesis when he was in college. My thesis was on beer. His was on rough grouse, and he lived with them, literally. So if you have questions, be sure to attend the Pike Gear YouTube channel at 8 p.m. this Wednesday, May 24th. I'll be on, Ben will be on, Brent will be on, Dave will be on, probably a couple other characters, and we're going to have some fun. We're going to have we're going to talk birds, and we're going to have a brew, thus the name Birds and Brew. So there. Okay, that wasn't that hard. I'm getting through this pretty quick. Boss shot shells. Now, besides telling you that they're the only copper-plated bismuth shell in the universe, you already know that because I've told you that a dozen times. We are going to, myself and my buddy Tyler from B3 Podcast, we are going to be at the Boss Ammo Plant on Friday afternoon, 4 to 6 p.m. I think I told you last time, I'm going to be there before that. If you want to get there early, I'll be there early. But from 4 to 6, you can get a little plant tour. You can buy some bling. You could get your shells. You could ask Brandon every question there is except proprietary questions, which you won't answer, about how to make the best shotgun shell in the world for non-tox shotgun shell in the world. That's right. So that's coming up June 2nd. I mean, that's like, 2 weeks? Holy crap. All of a sudden, I got my 4-month planner up, and it's starting to fill up. I'm going to be going down to Walton's. I promised them this year, except that a certain litter of dogs got in the way, I was going to go down to Walton's, and I was going to video some cooking, some sausage making, right? So I'm going to try to set it up where I can get down there to Walton's and bring my camera and set it up and show you the world of Waltons because they got everything but the meat. And I know you still you didn't possibly go through all the meat in your freezer. Now, you might have gone through all the birds in your freezer. It doesn't have to be wild game either. My wife buys big pork shoulder, and we grind it up with our Walton's grinder and vacuum seal it and put it in, make breakfast sausage. You can do anything with it. Like Gunner Kennels, well, you can do anything with a Gunner Kennel. I would say short of kicking it down to the bottom of the Grand Canyon. I don't think they've tested it for that, but they've tested it under any extreme condition. There's nothing you could do to break a Gunner Kennel that's on the face of normality, let alone their food crate. I bet you could dump the whole food crate with the locking latch on right over, well, I don't know how many 100 feet it could take. Check out their food crates, their kennels, their covers, their pads, their dog water. They got a really cool removable, quick remove, not like bolting something to the front of your cheap-ass crate. They got this really cool, quick removable dog bowl, great for summertime. When you just want to get your dog back in a crate, you don't want him to over drink water. And you can load this thing up from the outside of the kennel. Once your dog's in the thing, you're like, okay, he's cooled down now. He's respirating nicely. You can pour the water from the outside of the door, and it fills up the little dog dish on the inside of the door. Only Addison could come up with this stuff. Garmin just came up with all kinds of stuff. Next week's episode will be with some Garmin representatives, and we are going to do a deep dive into all the new Garmin stuff. We're waiting until my new stuff comes in the mail this week. I'm so excited. So just stay tuned. In 1 week from today, you'll be hearing all about the new Garmin lineup, and it's there's some, believe me, you're going to love that episode. I mean, well, you're not going to love it because you're going to end up buying something and you're like, damn it, I had to get another. Well, when you get done with that episode, if you don't start getting curious this week to look at what their new lineup has, wait till you hear about it. Then you get all the information about it, and then you can go to W Hunting Supply to get it. In fact, I'm going to be on a podcast with W. We are going to talk about the new stuff. And, they had a lot to – Garmin, well, you're going to hear about it next week. They do all kinds of product testing. People take it out in the field for a year. They kick the tires, and the guys at W were part of that, and they know they know it as good as Garmin, darn near as good as Garmin. They get their feedback from them. What could be better than that? Oh my gosh, excuse me. Well, I think where that's coming from, I don't have anything wrong with me. I'm not sick. But I got my sauna fired up yesterday. Finally got my sauna fired up. Now, the front changing room is not complete, but the sauna itself is. The heater is in. We got it up to temperature. The wife and I went in there. Apparently, everything I read about this, and I've used saunas for years back when I lived in Virginia, but I'm telling you what, I feel like I'm going to live to be 100 now. Look at the data on what 3 or 4 to 7 saunas a week can do. Like 60% all-cause mortality lowered in Finland. Of course, there's only 11 people in Finland. I don't know. But anyway, so that's where this is coming from. I think that sauna is just bringing the toxins out of me. So I'm going to light up a cigar and see if I can live forever. I'm trying to tie this in, okay? I might have screwed up. Your dog's not going to live forever, but he's going to live better and longer with Purina Pro Plan. Period. There's not another dog food out there that has the science, the nutrition, the background, I would say decades. Let's say the 100 years of making dog food behind them. I mean, how long has your dog food company been on the market? What? 10 years? 20 maybe? There's a couple where you're just feeding the new stuff, right? Oh, yeah, my dog food's been on the market 6 years. No, Purina, there's a reason. Okay, just like there's a reason to supplement your dog when they're working hard or when they're getting a little old. You go to Canine Athlete and you get some new dog for your old dog. Okay, get it? You get some new dog for your old dog, and all dogs. The Hydrate and Recover is just remarkable. It's the science behind human athletes is now the science behind canine athletes. Isn't that funny? That's the name of their company. The science behind canine athletes that we love and we own is there, and they need a little extra, not just an old bowl of water and some crappy kibble, okay? Take care of your dog's nutrition. Take care of your dog's training. I'm not sure. This is going to tie into Patreon. Patreon patrons, almost everything that I talk about on one of these episodes, almost everything, there is either a giveaway for or a discount code for from time to time. If you're a Patreon patron and you haven't started training your dog yet, there is something going on with the Upland Institute. You're like, what, Ron? The Upland Institute? What's the Upland Institute? You know what it is. It is the unbelievable training course that I put together with Justin McGrail, and I'm telling you, do a little training this year. Don't go for another year of golfing and saying, well, I'll get the dog out, after quiet seasons close, which here is on July 9th this year. It used to be the 15th, meaning we can go out on public lands again and exercise our dogs. You know what? Find a farmer's field. Find a ballpark. Find a ball diamond. Find a soccer field. Don't do it when the kids are there. Get your dog out and start working on some obedience. If you've got a new pup coming, a new pup ordered, or a new pup that just got home, you need to look at the Upland Institute Foundations and Fundamentals. That is the key. You could force break your dog with one of our courses. You could train him to be an advanced, steady dog. But you do the Foundations and Fundamentals course, and you will have a serviceable, workable hunting dog. How many other people can say that? Okay, and this is not segments of old videos. This was a year-and-a-half project that we did, filmed over 40 dogs to bring to you information you need to have a usable, huntable, working hunting dog. Okay, the Upland Institute. I know. Well, anyway, and if you're a patron, you know what I'm saying. Okay, because there is no. Well, there is something else you can do. If you're an Onyx Elite member, they've got where you can take a peek. That's right. You can take a peek at the Upland Institute. We give them all kinds of different clips from different segments, and it's a great partnership. They have supported the Upland Institute as part of their Onyx Elite program. If Onyx Elite thinks it's worth putting up in their program, maybe you believe them. Obviously, their product's great. And if you don't believe me, believe Onyx Elite. I believed them when I found out that tree was on my neighbor's property. Glad we didn't cut it down. Anyway, there we go. This episode, finally, I don't know that I've ever done an episode like this before. We're talking English labs, but we're really talking labs. But we're talking about English labs. Talking with Josh Miller. And Josh is I would say he's a young guy. He's not a young guy anymore. He's a middle-aged guy, and he's got kids and all the other stresses of life, and I love that. But he does a fantastic job of explaining how he went down the road of, as a lab trainer and earlier as a field trialer, of discovering some English labs and basically getting just what he was looking for, or at least always striving to. You're going to love this episode. This episode could translate to a lot of other breeds, but finally, a deep dive into labs. Talk to you soon. Love you guys. Love you girls. And I love whoever shows up at the Boss Ammo Plant and the Birds and Brews on May 24th at 8 p.m. on the YouTube channel for Bike Gear. Love you. Bye. Sorry, I forgot one thing. I have been negligent in my duties. The 2023 Hunting Dog Podcast hosted hunt at White Lake Hunting Lodge. I just forgot to mention it, and there's no time like now to make your reservations. It's going to be October 31st to November 3rd. And don't forget, my birthday's on the 30th, so I have a little birthday party. It's going to be in White Lake, South Dakota at the White Lake Hunting Lodge, October 31st, 2023. Don't miss it. It's going to be a hoot. Hootman. All right. Hey, everybody. It's Ron Bain with the Hunting Dog Podcast. I got reconnected with Josh Miller through the Onyx. What was that thing they called it? What was that thing they called it, Josh?
Yeah, I don't even know what they really called it. It was
Best
I think an
best breed
onyx rock.
ever, or best what's the best breed?
That's right. That's right.
Um, so Ben Brennington brought in a few of us in the dog world to talk about that, and he brought in Josh. Although Josh has a varied past, we wanted, we couldn't have just a bunch of pointing dog people there and not address labs. And then Josh made some comments on that. If you haven't watched it, I suggest anybody go back. I released it as an audio podcast. I think we had some good conversations, but we didn't really answer anything. And we may not today, but so Josh, give everybody a little 10,000-foot view of where you're at and what you're doing. And then we'll start with all my nosy questions about American and British labs.
Yeah, no, I love it. Well, thanks, Ryan. I appreciate you having me back on here. It's always fun getting to reconnect. Like you said, we connected many years ago, but it's fun to kind of reconnect and get back to it. So, yeah, at Riverstone Kennels, which is my kennel, we're based out of Western Wisconsin. I breed British Labradors. We have a lot of what I feel like are very tremendous litters every year, and have great clients and great relationships, lifelong relationships that come of that. And that's probably one of the most fun pieces of what I do. It's not just the dogs, it's the people, right? And the friendships that come with that. So I'm very passionate about that. We train. So training, actually, I was training well before I was breeding. I actually swore to myself that I would never be a breeder unless I really had a why. So I'm a big person. I'm a big why person. Anything I do, I want to have a very solid why behind it. We can dig into that later. But I found my why, and that's why I'm breeding British Labs. But I own American dogs. One of the most special American, or one of the most special Labradors I ever owned was an American Lab. So I'm not prejudiced by any means. But I also had a period of my career where I field trialed pointing dogs off horseback. So you kind of go from two different extremes there, from the retriever world to the pointing dog world. And but it's been a fun ride. I can tell you, for a kid that grew up not having any family. I didn't even know that this was an actual profession, to be honest with you, when I was growing up. To do what I'm doing now, and have the luxury of getting to wake up and have my quote unquote coworkers excited to see me every day as they wag their tails as I walk in the door. It's a pretty special thing, and something I really try not to take for granted every day.
Yeah. We won't dive too deep into it, but I have to feel that you had enough time in the field trial world. You went from 0 to 60 in a short amount of time. And the qualities you're looking for are the qualities you're looking for. And it doesn't mean it's everybody's want. It's not on everybody's wish list, right? Like me personally, I kind of became, I would call it a cooperation Nazi. I want a dog with a level of cooperation that matches its desire. But then there's some games you play games, sports, whether it's field trials or hunt tests, where you can deal with less cooperation and more desire, right? And how do you balance that?
Yeah, you're spot on, Ron. One of the things that, so I have, and I'm sure we'll dig into this a little bit at some point in this the show, but I have a checklist that I go through. I bring in quite a few dogs in from overseas every year, and I evaluate them for about a year. Some, of course, don't miss the cut well before that mark, but they have to be with me for well over a year before they were to be deemed what I call special, which is like a percent of a percent, and then they get entered into my breeding program. But what I'm looking for in a Labrador, like what you just talked about in cooperation, I call teamwork. So I want to be a team player. That's what I have a title as. If you're a team player, which means you're not a renegade, you're not in this for yourself. You understand, you want to please, you want to work together, but also like you have to have that desire to want to go do it. If you get a dog that's over a team player and is so reliant on you and doesn't have the confidence and doesn't have the gear to go do it, so there's a balance there.
Yeah.
But I go back to my horseback field trial days with the pointers. I mean, you wanted a dog that was going to go do it on their own, right? Like you couldn't be there to hold their hand. You needed them to go have that motor, have that gear, be super independent, go hunt for themselves. And so this is something that I've talked about in the past, but it's really when you find the usually the difference in if the dog or the breed is right for you, it is what are you looking for? Like, be honest with yourself. What is it that you're looking for, right? Because, like, I would tell people all the time, if you are a weekend warrior that hunts 2 to 3 weekends a year, like those field trial dogs that I was running off horseback, those are not the dogs for you. I mean,
Right.
those are a different gear, a different motor, and they're probably not going to be that great at home companion that you are looking for 355 days a year. I mean, that's a huge deal. And I think we all go through progressions in our lives too. Yeah, I'm actually in a progression in my life that I've never been in, and I'm finding it extremely difficult for me to accept and handle, which is I have a 4-year-old daughter and a 2.5-year-old son. And I have one of what I believe is one of my best young dogs that I brought in from overseas. I think he's got a tremendous amount of potential. I think he's got a tremendously high ceiling as far as when I look at where I think he can go. And every dog that I've ever developed has been very routine. I keep him in the same routine. I go in the same method. I have my own method as far as how I want to develop and progress a dog. None of that has ever included, sleeping in my daughter's bed at night, which this dog does, because he and my daughter are absolute best friends. If I had 100 people standing in the Walmart parking lot, I promise you that dog would find that little girl, get right to her side, and wouldn't leave her side. And she adores him. So, I'm having to accept and understand that this is a major part of his life. That's a major role that he's filling in my family. And I have to accept the consequences that come with that. She thinks she's a little dog trainer. So I hear 100 times a night, solo come, solo sit, solo come. And I know he's not listening to any of it. So I know it's probably going to hurt me tomorrow when we go out for training, but I just have to go with this. So it's one of those things that I think, we all go through these progressions in life. And sometimes, where you're at in life may dictate what dog you should be looking for.
Yeah, that's a good point. I never heard anybody talk about training and having, I mean, other than complaining about the kids having the kids, right? But like you said, I know trainers that are like yourself. They're very regimented, and you've almost probably got a whiteboard in your head, like, okay, it's time for water introduction. It's time, and I'm not going to wait because I think this dog is slow. I've got my way to do it. Yeah, and then all of a sudden, it's like you're sharing the dog. Now
Mhm.
she's probably not going to really mess up the training, but she messed up your pattern. Like
Right.
you didn't go out in the kennel. You're like, oh, I got to go in my daughter's room and get the dog. And none of my other dogs have ever slept with anybody.
Right. Right. Yeah. And what else is interesting too is now we are heading into hunt test season where she wants to run him, which I think is absolutely fantastic. On the other side, I'm going, I've got to get this guy his title so he can get into my breeding program so he can do the things that I need him to do from a business side of things. But I'm also loving that my little girl wants to go do what dad does and be a part of this, but she's not going to handle him on blinds. She's not going to. So, I mean, I'm looking at this dog going, well, are you going to run junior and start at hunt test your entire life? Because that's what she's going to be able to do until she's 10 years old, So it's a very interesting dynamic. I've never had to go through this before, but I think for me as a breeder, it's really interesting. It opens my eyes to, it puts myself in my client's shoes, I think more than not, because so often people want to go so fast. They have these high goals, these high anticipations, have all these aspirations they want to do with this dog when they get him as an 8-week-old puppy. But the reality is life gets in the way,
It
right? And then
does.
all of a sudden, you get to opening day and you're looking back going, well, shoot, we've trained 3 times all year, right?
Yeah.
Like your expectation of how that dog performs, should follow suit. So it's an interesting dynamic, that's for sure.
Yeah, but like you said about you're putting yourself in your customer side, like you could almost make a general statement. Labs are just great dogs, right? And there's probably more family dog labs than any other breed, or at least sporting breed. But again, they're not all meant to be in the house, right? And but like there's another piece of data. Like now, if that dog makes the cut, like, wow, I never I never wanted to advertise for the best sleeping partner lab, but you kind of proofed it. You know what I mean? Like this dog is got something, I don't want to say special, but you got to see a side of the dog that you wouldn't have seen before, which always helps adding data to things.
Yeah, you're right. It's something that, yeah, obviously, before I had kids, I define an off switch as a dog that had the motor, had the drive. I could show it off in the field. But then if we came and sat on the front porch, that it could just sit there, lay down, chill out, calm down, and not be a nuisance, not have to be pacing back and forth, not have to have his face in your face,
Right.
panting all over you, that kind of thing. Well, now I'm looking at an off switch. It's similar, but I mean, do you have that soft side that you can interact with a little girl like that
Yeah.
and have that side? Because not all dogs do. Like I have my, some of my personal dogs that like they do great with my kids, but it's not that, right?
Right.
That's a different level
Right.
of understanding. So it is a fun thing to watch.
I mean, I would bet that dog could have probably gone into therapy or anything else. Probably it just got one of those noodles on its between its ears that's like, wow, boy, I hit the he probably goes in the kennel once in a while and brags to the other dogs.
Oh, I'm sure he does. He thinks he's pretty cool.
Um, so this is not going to be a the world according to Josh or the world according to Ron, but I'd like to kind of dispel some of the myths because you said something right in the beginning. You've been importing quite a few British Labs over the years, and some don't make the cut. So I don't want anybody to think that's like, oh, you got to get a British Lab, right? Because it's still a selection process. But what would you say are like bullet points that would be almost, let's just say, stereotypical that you could 90% count on? What differences are? Or are there just good ones in both and you just prefer a look or a size or something like that?
So, Ron, I love that question, and I love even more the first part of it because we are in a really interesting day and age where I think the British Lab thing is a little bit of a fad. I think
Yeah.
people hear the name, I think they get excited about it, but just because a dog or a line comes from overseas does not automatically make them this special dog.
Right.
Uh, Bring in a lot of dogs, from overseas that just don't have it. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say maybe somebody who started this should have said imported lab. Because
Right,
that is a true statement. It is an
right.
imported dog.
That's right. Well, so what's so interesting about this was I believe social media is doing a disservice to the British Lab. And I can talk about why the British dogs, 'cause I think that's important to me. But I have put my literal life I've dedicated to developing, what I believe are some of the best Labradors that I possibly can. And there's a reason I'm bringing them in from overseas. But I'm seeing I swear it's like overnight there's another British lab breeder. I've never heard of them. Another British lab breeder, another British lab breeder. I'm like,
Yeah.
what in the world is going on? I have spent a lot of years developing friendships and relationships with dog people overseas. I
Mhm.
have stayed at their house. Brought them here. They've stayed at my house. They know my family. We talk on a regular basis. And you would be shocked at how often I get screenshots from my friends like, who's this guy? Who's that guy? They're contacting me through Facebook or through Instagram and asking
Wow.
if I'll sell them dogs. And then I hear the stories of these dogs that, I mean, I know that they're not what I'm looking for. I know that they're not right, but somebody that's communicating over social media doesn't know that. So they buy this dog, they get him here, and they're going to breed that dog because now they have an investment, right?
Right, right.
So then, these British Labs, and I guess I don't mean, I was using air quotes, I don't mean British Labs because they are from overseas, but it doesn't mean that they are the right British Lab. And there's a big difference, between the two of them.
Or even to say they're not the right lab, right?
100%.
And
100%.
that's where, like, I think we talked before we hit record about the difficulty of being a breeder and setting a bar for yourself. And I did enough breeding with the Brocco breed, realizing that that was a rare breed, not loved by, not embraced by the hunting world. And I did what I thought was the best, but I even made what's the word? I lowered the bar a couple times. Like, well, yeah, she's okay. And I took another lady's dog and bred it to a male, and I had no business doing it. I mean, yeah, did the pups all get good homes? That's sure that's a goal of a breeder, but the real goal of the breeder is you can't always improve the breed, but at least contain or maintain the standards of the breed and what we're looking for.
Yeah, so kind of my process that I take. So I love bringing in young dogs from overseas. When I say young dogs, usually anywhere from like that 8 to 10, 11 month age. I love that age because I know I can at least have an idea what I'm getting into, right? So like
Right.
I know that they've got a head on their shoulders. I know kind of what the size, I know the temperament, kind of what. So I'm taking an educated guess now. And I bring
Right.
them over. So like right now, I have 3 dogs that I have purchased overseas, working on a 4th one, but let's just say I have those 4. I'll bring them in. I'll keep all 4 of them for about a year, and some make the cut and some don't. And oftentimes, so if I bring in uh 30, 40 dogs, one of those might stay. That's how picky I'm being on this. So now what happens the other 29? Well, they get sold as finished dogs, and oftentimes they're a dog of a lifetime for people.
Right.
But and I love that part of it. But what I'm looking for is super, super intentional, because that's what's going to pass on. So a great example. I just probably about 7 months ago or so, I had a dog that I absolutely adored. I loved this dog. His name was Theo. Theo was beautiful, conformationally perfect. He had the temperament, a big, big motor, great off switch. He had everything you were looking for. But he dropped short about 30% of the time in his retrieves. When I say drop short, I meant like by 5 feet, he'd drop it instead of finishing that retrieve. So one of the things I'm looking for is a natural mouth, soft mouth. Don't be chompy. Don't be shaking this thing. And a natural retrieve. It sounds like something that I believe should be a priority for a retriever breeder, right? A natural retrieve.
Right.
Now, I know I can fix that, and I did. So I put him through a trained retrieve. Some people call force fetch. I have a little less forceful way of doing this, why I call it trained retrieve. But I put him through a trained retrieve, fix the problem. If you saw Theo today, you would never know it, but I know it.
But you
And I
knew it.
know, and
Yeah.
I know that if he produces puppies, he is going to pass on what was natural in him, not what I trained into him. Right.
Right.
So for Theo, I broke my own heart because he's now been a part of my family for a year. Right. So I ripped my own heart out that way. And that is hard. I don't mean to be, sappy on that. It is difficult. They're a big part of my life. So I rehome him to a great family. Yeah, they adore him. But I also lost a significant amount of money on that. Now, sometimes people go as a business like, well, that's foolish. Like, why didn't you not jack up the price? That's the wrong way. But why didn't you price the dog to where you'd break even or make money on when you sold him? Well, because like, I'm sorry, like he wasn't a $30,000-$40,000 dog, right? But by the time I purchased him, buy the flight, buy the, with the exchange rate, get the broker fee, get him here, and then put a year of my time into him, like I can't look you in the eye and say he's worth that. So I sell him for what I believe he's worth, and I take the bath on it. I just don't believe, like, I believe I'm one of very few breeders that would do that, to take a bath in a situation like that. So the question usually comes then, well, how can you do that? It's pretty foolish business, sense. How can you do that? Well, because when you hit home runs, you hit home runs, and they
Right.
make up for all of that, right? So there's some give and take there, but I truly believe that's why we're producing the puppies we are, is because I'm able to break my own heart, look at this as a business and say, I'm sorry, Theo, I love you to death, but you are just not going to make that cut, and move on. And that's a very difficult thing to do.
Yeah, you're right. And most breeders in the country are, I hate the term backyard breeder, because if dogs weren't in the breeder's backyard, I don't know where is he going to have them, down the road at a locker. But most breeders are much more small time. They try to make good decisions, but they don't have, literally, it's like having a store big enough to stock everything. Like you want to stock all those traits and attributes in your store of dogs, so to speak. And to know that dog, you didn't take the decision and go like, well, I'm going to breed it to a female who always holds it as a natural puppy, right? Because now I got a 75% chance. That's
Right.
pretty good, right? Yeah, that's a tough one. I don't know. I mean, I'm not in your shoes. I don't train and breed dogs, but I don't think I don't think I could make that decision.
Yeah,
That's a tough one.
It is. It's really hard from the financial level, from the emotion level, and now, like I mentioned earlier on, yeah, I've got kids. Like this does get difficult because
Hmm.
the kids are around the dogs all the time now, and but I can't afford to own 50 dogs. You know, like I can
Right.
only keep the ones that are a part of the business. So what's interesting, so I've never really dug into this, Ron, but now you brought it up. I guess I'm gonna run with it a little bit. So you talked about kind of the backyard breeder, and I adore Labrador retrievers. I mean, I've made it my livelihood, right? I've made it my literal life because it's a 24/7 kind of a job. But at the same side, I get really frustrated with Labradors in general because it seems like everybody and their brother has one, and most everybody and their brother feels like their dog is the best dog in the world, which they should. That's fantastic, but that doesn't mean that that dog has to breed, right?
Right.
And so sometimes when I hear people go like, "Well, I got my dog from so and so, they have like one litter every couple of years." That's great, but I know that if you're doing that from a financial side, you're probably not able to make the sacrifices that I'm making, right? You're probably not able to put into the health testing. So we're up to, I think it's 22, or my wife handles all this stuff. She'd be able to tell you this. It's like 22 health tests that we run on every single dog to make sure that we're producing the absolute healthiest puppies that we possibly can. Like that's a cost, right? I mean, it all goes into this thing. And so
Ridiculous. Unless your wife has her own vet clinic, I guess that's going to be probably one of your big expenses every year. Yeah.
I would hate to know how many veterinarians' kids I'm putting through college, just with all this expense. But it does, it all adds up. But again, I'm trying to do what I can. But here's the dichotomy in this, right? So I'm trying to do all of that the best that I can. I have to run it as a business, okay? And on the same side, like I'm not this corporate conglomerate, right? Like I have 10, 11 litters a year, right? So I'm not a puppy mill pumping out 30, 40 litters a year. I'm
Right.
not crank. So I know, Ron, like you knew this already, but I've accepted the fact I'm not going to become a millionaire doing this. I'm not going to
Can't.
become
It's
wealthy doing this,
absolutely impossible. Yeah.
right? But I love what I do. And I can
Right.
wake up every single day and want to go to work. And I feel like that right there is something that not many people have the luxury of. And that's why I'm willing to invest. And that's why I'm willing to turn into my business what I have. But sometimes I feel like you got to look at both sides of that because there's definitely that fine line between the two of them.
Oh, 100%. Um, it it pales in comparison. Well, that's not the right way of saying it. I wanted to go back to what you said about that. The fellow goes like, "Yeah, this guy he only breeds every few years." Well, that kind of does sound good. It's like, well, at least he's not just cranking out, but somebody who is producing a line of dogs is doing 10 times the work than that guy that no, and the guy probably got a good dog too. I mean, but health testing is I mean, that was the thing. The first litter of dogs I had was a German short hair that and this is 40 years ago. And I found another person with a German short hair in the yard. Like, he's good looking. My first selection was that's a good looking dog. That was like me marrying my first wife. It was a mistake. know, I I should have done some health testing or something. But I think there can't be that many breeders that do that, and the ones that do, I'm glad you said it too because there is no real fortune to be made. You can make a living, but there is no fortune to be made. Let's just say you could double your size, double employees, double your property. You're going to make the same amount of money because you're
That's
going to
right.
double all your expenses all right along the way.
Yeah,
You know?
double your headache too. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the one part that I've learned too. Well, and so you're 100% right. Yeah, on all of that. I mean, it's one of those businesses that you really truly have to have a passion for. You have to be willing to dedicate your life to it. Which I'm really fortunate to have my wife, and that we have done that.
Yeah.
Here's the last ripple of this that I feel like is so valuable. So my wife handles the breeding side of our business and I handle the training side. So we're training these puppies, right? So if I have a stud that went through it all, made the cut, I deem him as special, he's gone and proven himself, he does great things, but he starts producing puppies that aren't what I think he should be producing, we will then move on and cut him from the program because, and that's something that I have the luxury of doing because I'm watching these puppies grow up. And so what's interesting is that I feel like that's a whole nother element to this, because just because you have a fantastic animal does not mean that that animal is going to go produce more fantastic animals or
Right.
at the level that they are. And what's neat about that is when I watch these puppies grow up, I get to know their temperaments, their personalities. It is uncanny how crazy close a puppy that has never met his dad in his life will move the same, will act the same, will respond the same, will think the same. I mean, half the time, Ron, I swear, if I'm working with one of my dog's name is Brock. If I'm working with a Brock puppy, I promise you, I swear I know what he's gonna think before he thinks it. I mean, it's a really cool
And that,
thing.
and that can go like right down to kennel manners. Some
Yes.
dogs come out, like I've got one now that he insists, unless it's like the third time, like, but in the morning, he has got to literally go between my legs like a figure eight and get scratched, where other dogs just want to go outside. And I find out that his dad was the same way, and so was his grandpa. So
Isn't that crazy?
it's crazy. Like, how does that? And then there's the bad ones that like to paint their kennels with poop, and there's the downside of all those. And you're like, yep, that's one of them puppies, And this is a rabbit hole, but I think one of the things people suffer from when they get a puppy is the chew toys and how much stuff they're allowed to destroy. Do you find that also in a lineage kind of a thing, like a less destroying type puppy? Can you spot that in some of the lines?
Well, what's so funny is like those types of traits absolutely carry through. We have one of our studs name is Clyde, and Clyde has this habit of he will pick up. He always has to be carrying something, whether that's slippers, whether that's shoes, whether I think it's a little obnoxious because I'm like, oh, like I can never have two shoes in the same spot ever.
Right.
But it's amazing how often I'll tell people that and they go, "Oh, my Clyde puppy does the exact same thing, does the
Yeah.
exact same." So there are certainly traits that carry on through that, and just these little quirks that you would never think, But this to me, that's what just hopefully screams at you. Genetics are everything. They
Yeah.
are so important.
Yeah. I mean, you got to back it up with the health testing, but the genetic and not having rose-colored glasses on, but we kind of covered that. It's everybody is guilty of it, but striving to not be guilty of it is what it's like when I've judged pointing dogs. When you first become a judge, you think you know how to judge dogs. And then some wise older judge says to you, "Are you actually talking about your dog?" Because you're like, "Oh, I've never seen a dog. No, my dog doesn't do it. My dog got a Yeah, I didn't like." And you're like, "No, don't." You have to like take off every layer of rose-colored glasses to judge. On a hunt test version where there's a standard. Now, field trials we know is subjective to style and the day and sometimes the weather, but yeah, peeling off, and I think that comes in with look at your own training. But I mean that's like a whole like I think this might be like a semi-annual thing we got to do, because I can think of 3 other podcasts we could talk just about what you do with your puppy owners,
Yeah.
and the support. Like I gotta imagine, even finding an hour or two to talk to me is difficult, because when you're not training, there's got to be somebody calling you, right?
Yeah, there is. And so first off, I have to thank you. What everyone doesn't know is I think I rescheduled this like 2 or 3 times today on it because I was trying to play the weather and I had a thunderstorm coming in. And I had to try to get my work done. Obviously, I couldn't do it afterwards. So I appreciate you being flexible with me. That was fantastic. But it is. And so here's what's so interesting. I was just having this conversation. This kind of goes with this. I had this conversation this morning with a friend of mine, and he was wanting me to get back to him on something, and my day yesterday just got away from me. I didn't get nearly what I needed to done, everything. So when I look back on what kind of threw my day off, I had 2 phone calls that were both over an hour long of people that were calling, just wanting some advice of how to work with their dog. And I will say that this is my fault, right? I can own that. But I have an extreme passion for helping people. I really, really enjoy that. And so I always want to be helpful. But this is such a weird, like being a dog trainer is such a weird profession in this manner, because I don't know of another profession. Like I wouldn't call my plumber and be like, hey man, so my faucet's leaking. So could you tell me how to
Right.
find the problem, how to fix the problem? Where do I get the parts? How much is it going to cost? What should I be planning on? And then when I get back, like walk me through how to do this. And then thanks, bye. You know what I mean? Like it's such an interesting, I feel like there's this perception of like, well, we play with dogs all day, so we have all this time in the world to talk. We have this time to, but like we have clients to be taken care of. We have dogs. I mean, these dogs are a 24/7 job, just the care part of it. And that's not the training part of it. And so it is our days get really full. We call this hay season, so we're in hay season right now. Make hay while the sun shines. Like for us up here in Wisconsin, when we have basically November through March, where we don't accept gun dogs in. We do obedience, we do bird and gun intro, but we don't have water work to do water because it's all frozen, right? We got 2 to 3 feet of snow we're trying to file. We can't do it the same job in the winter as we can in the summer. And so we just don't accept them in. And so like this time of year, it's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be, and that's another thing. I have a friend, this is just a sidebar, but he's like, man, I would love to just quit my job and start training dogs. I'm like, just be careful, because you just signed up. I was self-employed, and there's a self-employed saying, you've probably heard it. I love being self-employed. You can work any 80 hours a week you want to.
That's so true.
Right. So I've never been envious. Honest to God, I've been envious of other professions. I've never been envious of dog trainers because I've met so many of them over the years. Happy, great people, love spending time with them, but they don't have time.
No. Yeah, it's hard because the reality is we've lost friendships over the years just with, hey, it's 5 o'clock. I want, come meet us down at the bar, or come hang out, or come on this trip on the weekend. Well, we can't, right? Because we have it's a 24/7 care, right? So it is kind of difficult to manage that. But once you get the right circle of people, I mean, to me, the best way that I've ever been told this was from a mentor of mine. You probably know her. Do you know Delmer Smith?
Yes, I got to interview him once too. Yeah.
Okay,
he's a hoot.
Oh my gosh, he's a fantastic person. One of the best readers of animals I've ever been around. I learned so much just by watching him watch animals, but that's another story for another day. So he told me one time, he goes, Josh, if you're going to do this, there's one thing you have to understand, is that this is exactly like milking cows. What he meant by that is that it's every day. You don't get a day off. You don't get time off. Right. But then he kind of grabbed me by the shoulder and brought me in, and he goes, but you don't get any milk out of this deal.
That's good. Yeah, he is. I was fortunate enough, and I mean, he's still kicking, but I was fortunate enough about 3 or 4 years ago. Bob West from Purina got him set up with me in a conference room, and I got a few good Delmar stories.
Yeah,
and one of them might be that he may be responsible for coyotes in the eastern United States. I'll leave it at that. I'll just leave it at that.
He is an interesting man.
So before we make people wait for the controversial stuff, give me a little American versus British bullet points, so to speak. And not that you're trying to sell anybody on one or the other, but what have you found that made you go in one direction?
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so I had American Labs before I ever had a British Lab, and I'm actually so before I get into this, the first thing I always like to tell people is they are both Labrador Retrievers.
Mm-hmm.
Like they are not separate breeds. They're Labrador Retrievers. Is just the traits in which certain people are looking for. Okay, so I'm actually really open about like I said before, I was a trainer before I was a breeder, and in my early years, I hated British Labs. I mean, I hated them. When people dropped off a dog and they said it was a British Lab, I was like, oh my gosh, again. And and the reason was because back then that they were, the way that I called them, they were slugs. They didn't have a motor. They didn't have go. You kind of had like almost like a boxier, squattier kind of a bill. Like it wasn't what I looked for, right? And as a trainer, if you have a dog that does not have desire, that puts you in a really difficult spot really fast, right?
Right.
That's why I didn't like them. So I finally got the first one in that I really liked. Puppy comes in, and I feel like no matter what breed, like everybody has a breed they don't like, right? But if you saw one of that one breed you didn't like, you saw a good one, you'd go, oh gosh, I like that dog, right?
Yeah.
That's
Yep.
what happened to me. Saw a British Lab I really liked. I was like, oh gosh. Well, in this puppy class, there were 3 puppies. They were all British Labs and they're all dynamite. And I was like, gosh. So I started talking to the owners. They're all from the same breeder. So being the person I am, I call the breeder. I'm like, hey, can you tell me what you're doing, why you're doing it? This isn't kind of what I'm used to. Tell them the story. Really interesting stuff. And my wife, if she was sitting here, she would tell you this. I can never just tiptoe into something. I can never ease into something. It's like full throttle, go
Yep.
for it. So I hung up the phone and I booked a flight overseas. I have never even been out of the country. I'm like, at this point, I think I'm in my early 20s, never been out of the country, and I book a flight overseas, and I found a field trial, and I'm going to go to this field trial in Scotland. I don't know anyone. Like, it's just a complete whim. But I was like, I got to go see this. So I get overseas, and the first thing that was totally horrifying was driving in a car that the steering wheel was on the wrong side, and then driving on the wrong side.
Been there, done that.
The number of times I almost pulled into oncoming traffic, like at a T. Oh man, it was awful.
Yeah.
But somehow, by the grace of God, I make it up to this trial grounds up in the very north end of Scotland. Now, at this point, I am field trial. I'm hunt testing, mainly hunt testing at the time, but I'm hunt testing here in the States, right? So I have my own dogs. I'm hunt testing, so I have a perception of what a dog event is like.
Yeah.
So I get up to the north end of Scotland, and there's this little hotel that I swear the room was like the size of like my bathroom, right? Just tiny little room, tiny little hotel. But all because we're in the middle of nowhere, everyone that was a part of this trial, so all the handlers, all the judges, everybody stayed at this hotel, which is kind of cool. So the next morning, I hadn't really met anyone yet. Next morning, I get up early, get to the field trial grounds, and I'm just kind of standing there watching, right, observing. And I'm used to big truck, big trailer, pull in, 10 to 20 dogs on it, right? Well, this was way different, right? Because it was like, well, here's a Subaru, and here's
The
here's
Range
that.
Rover. There.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And most of them, the dog was sitting in the front seat, right? It was a very different vibe. And I'm like, okay, so this is different. Maybe not in the front seat, but in the car, right?
Yeah.
So they're driving in, and I was like, okay, this is different. And there were, some people that had trucks with like the dog kennels in the back, and but not many. It was a really diverse crowd. And so one thing I learned is that most of the time at these trials, people are only handling one dog, which was interesting to me because I didn't come from that, right? So
Mhm.
I'm watching everybody kind of come into this. And there's a lady that today she's a very good friend of mine, but at this moment I'd never met her. She walks by me, and in the thickest Scottish accent I've ever heard in my life, she says, "Good morning." And I'm sure I responded in the thickest Wisconsin accent she had ever heard in her life. Good morning. And she stopped and she turned, she looked at me, she goes, well, you're not from around here, are you? And I said, no. I introduced myself. And she goes, well, I'd like to find somebody. I have a job that I could use some help with. Would you like a job for the day? And I was like, absolutely. I'd love to help out. I'd love to get involved. She gives me this job that's called the game carrier. Okay. So I later found out they all had a good laugh that the only American there just jumped in and willingly accepted being the grunt of the trial, because my job was to carry the game. So the first thing that impressed me about these field trials overseas was that they're done on live hunts and live game. So this is a walk-up style trial. So we walk in a line, and there's about 6 gunners kind of spread out. And on the left-hand side, there's 2 judges, 2 handlers, 2 dogs. On the right-hand side, 2 judges, 2 handlers, 2 dogs. And then there's a gallery of handlers and dogs walking their dogs on leashes, and they kind of follow along. So birds get up, shots start going off, and the judge will say, you send your dog on that bird there. Okay, you send your dog on that bird there. And so it was really interesting to me, the live hunt part. Some people would retrieve there was a 10-yard stone dead, and some would get a 200-yard sailor that was running, and those dogs were expected to complete the retrieve that they were asked to pick up.
And not
So
pay attention to the crowd and the gallery behind them and everything else.
that's right.
That's
That's right.
crazy.
Yeah, it was really neat. So we get so that was the first thing that I noticed. So one of the first retrieves that stuck out to me that I'll never forget was there was like an apple orchard. This best way that a guy could describe it, and it had like a barbed wire fence. Think of like a 4-stranded barbed wire fence, so probably like I don't know 4 or 5 feet tall somewhere in there, but without the barbs, it was just the wire. And this little yellow female, this bird sailed into this orchard, and they asked this handler to send the little yellow female. This dog was like a rocket. Pew! Smooth, fast, boom, jumps the fence in one leap. And I was like, wow. And again, my perception of a British Lab, like they wouldn't be able to run that far, let alone jump the fence, right? So I'm like, well, this is different, right? And so she comes back. Felt like forever, is probably a minute, right? She comes back with that rooster in her mouth, looks like it's as big as she is because she was pretty small statured, jumps the fence on the way back, but she misses it because I'm sure the extra weight she's carrying. Her front pads land on the top strand, her bottom pads on the third, and she like sits there as it wobbles and kind of catches herself and then jumps over, finishes the retrieve. I was like, oh my gosh, like that was really fun to watch. So we keep going. And keep going, start, see more retrieves. And we stop. And because this is on a live hunt, live terrain, the judges are trying to keep everybody safe. It's like, hey, so we're going to dog leg kind of around to the left. So the left side is going to pivot. The right side is going to work around. We're going to work this down. And I'm standing there holding all these birds at this point. And their dog, this dog is sitting 3 feet from me. And he yawns. And at the end of the yawn, as dogs do, right, they go, oh, right? Well, the judge turned and looked at him and said, he's out. Oh. And I was like, for what? Like, what in the world, right? And so I later found out when I asked the judges, they said he squeaked, but what they meant is that he made a noise. No noise is acceptable. Wow. And the reason is, and this is why, excuse me. So we kind of go back around to talking about like find the right dog for what you need, right? Or what you're looking for. Well, so for me, I'm a waterfowl hunter. Yeah, waterfowl hunt about 90 days a year. Most waterfowl hunters do, there's a lot of sitting there, being patient, being calm, being quiet, right? Like probably the biggest compliment that I get on a hunt is not about the big blind or the big marks, is that people come and go, gosh, I forgot the dog was even there because he was so well behaved. Like I love that compliment. Nobody likes to be in a blind with a dog that is whining and anxious and squeaking and right? Like nobody likes to, that's a nuisance to have there, right? Yeah. But the test that I ran right before I came over here, we had to honor, I had a dog, if you could see my screen of this, the yellow dog right here. We honored a dog that, dang near sounded like Chewbacca over there, but went and did the work, right? So on paper, those dogs are equals, right? Well, I don't want to hunt with that dog that is sitting there being loud, being vocal, being anxious, right? So it's what you're looking for. So why it's such a priority over there is that most of the time when you're picking up game on these estates, it's not like here. There's not all this public land hunting opportunity. It's kind of an elitist thing, right? So going to hunt on these estates oftentimes costs big money, which means if you're the dog handler picking up for one of these big hunts, they do not want the dog being a nuisance or taken away from the experience for this gentleman that's come spent this money to be here. Excuse me. So, sorry, excuse me. Right. So yeah, there's those different traits that they're looking for. I felt like applied so well to what I was looking for. So as we get done, I could tell you about all these different retrieves and everything, and that's great. But the one thing that really stuck out to me was we got back after the day, got back to the hotel. I went up and I showered, and I'm just thinking about all these retrieves that I saw, right? Like, again, my mind is blown because these are not what I was expecting to see when I came over. I was expecting to see these slugs. And so there was a pub attached to the hotel. So I come down to the lobby, walk into the pub, and there's like this L-shaped bar that kind of jet around to my right. And at the bar, I can see all the handlers that I just watched, run all day. So I'm kind of seeing, is there a place I can sit? I'd love to talk to some of these guys. So I came around the bar of the L shape, came around the bar, and I literally had a life-changing moment. Because as I came around the bar, I saw all these dogs, there's probably 4 or 5 of these dogs that I just watched compete, laying at the bar stool, calm, quiet, not a nuisance, not a pain, just laying there. And I
Yeah.
just watched these dogs go make these incredible retrieves. I know they've got big motors. I know they can do, but I looked at that and I was like, this is what I want. This is what I believe the majority of people that are here in the States that want a Labrador Retriever, that's what they want. They want a dog that they can take places, that have the off switch, that they can do all that stuff. But I don't know any outdoorsman at all that's like, if he's off on the field, that's okay. Right? Like us as egos, like I know I wouldn't like that, right? Like we don't want that dog's gonna be a slug. So I sat there to kind of conclude my story here. So I sat at the bar and started kind of having some drinks and talking to everybody. Well, Ron, like I thought from Wisconsin, thought that I like we're drinkers, right? Like I was like, yeah, we're like the big leagues,
Well,
right?
yeah, actually, you are. Wisconsin is, I think, the number one.
we don't hold a candle to the Scots. I mean, it was unbelievable. I learned real quick. I'm not going to try to keep up. So, but these guys, the longer the night went on, the more they'd share with me. And so, towards the end of the night, I was sitting next to a guy that, again, today is a great friend of mine. But we're sitting there talking, and I'd finally worked up the courage to ask him what I was wanting to ask him the whole time. So I said, Tom, you got to tell me what I think of when I think of a British Lab in the States. It's like they don't have the motor, they don't have the go. Like that's not what I watched today. That's not what I witnessed. So tell me what I'm missing here. Like what are you guys doing, or what am I missing to where there's a disconnect? And he had a beer that I swear was like 2 feet tall. He took a big sip of it and he put it down. He looked at me with just a big grin on his face and he goes, Josh, do you really think we're sending our good dogs over there? I was like, oh my gosh. Okay. So honestly, Ron, from that point forward, probably not, I mean, I dedicated my life. I mean, I was going to try to make it not sound so sappy, but it's the truth.
Yeah.
To building relationships and getting the right dogs here. And that's kind of been
So
our,
really, those qualities that for the, let's call it the hunt test and field trial labs, it always existed in England. You just when things started coming over, you just didn't see the even close to the best of the best. You saw probably the worst of the best.
right.
And
Well, yeah, and I don't mean to be that critical because I'm sure
I'm sure there's always some good ones. There's
right,
always some
right.
good ones. Yeah.
But like what I had always heard was like, well, they're the gentleman's dog. They have a great off switch. They have a great like that's great. But I'm also a very competitive person. As you know, my athletic background is like it won't leave me, right? So I want to go compete. I want a dog that's going to go wow somebody. Well, I
Right.
can't do that with a dog that doesn't have the motor and desire, right? So I needed to have that side of it. But I'm really proud of the dogs that I have now. And I have the right friendships and relationships overseas to be getting these dogs over here, which is really important. I mean, that's how you're going to make this thing happen.
Yeah.
You can't do this over social media and over a phone call here and there. I mean, it really is relationships.
Yeah. I mean, you think about it sounds like I would buy one of your labs tomorrow because that is exactly what the last few dogs, not my beginning dogs, but the last few dogs I've had. It's not that I insisted it. I just happened to get the right dog for me that literally could, not do any work, but still have a motor. It does exist. It really does. And this wire-haired visual that I have now, I can sit in here. Every other dog could get antsy and whiny. And he's like, well, dad hasn't let me out of the kennel. So why would I whine? Why would I eat my food bowl? Why would I? And all the other ones, there's a point where they just can't take it anymore. They're like, he's going to let us out any minute. And this dog I swear, if I could sit here for 3 days, he'd just look at me and wait, you
Right.
know? So the temperament, and now I don't know if his motor matches his temperament. I think it's a good motor. It's certainly a huntable motor, but that speaks volumes to me with a lot of breeds. Like one being the German Wirehair. We got the Drahthaar and the Wirehair. We all know that every Wirehair came from Germany, right? And every lab came from, labs. So they're all German Wirehairs, but the way they breed and use them in Germany is different than the way we do here. And the people who want those, they're going to seek those out. It may not be the right dog for everybody, but that is an example of how the good dogs in a country of origin I shouldn't say the best dogs, but are some of the best examples of that breed. Because and what you said about Europe, besides they got the traffic pattern all screwed up. I mean, I did the same thing. My wife and I went there for a week, and after 3 days, we returned to rent a car and use cabs and stuff. I couldn't drive, you know, but the there's a real benefit of that privatization of Europe. Like they're envious of our public lands, but I'm envious of their customs and their control, their behavior. Everything they expect a lot out of themselves and their dogs. And I've got friends here when I go somewhere. When I was at our NAVDA training grounds last night, there's dogs barking, yiping. The owner walks away with one dog, and the rest of us have to hear it just bark for 20 minutes. And they don't need to be like that. They really don't,
Right. Well,
quiet is a wonderful thing with dogs.
and I truly believe noise is genetic, and sometimes I get some kickback from people but like
It is.
yeah,
I agree 100%.
right. How can you say that like every other trait that a dog shows is genetic, but that one's not, right? Like
Right.
now I believe you can take a naturally quiet dog, mishandle them, and make them
Sure.
noisy for sure.
You can give them a cell phone and have 300 missed calls. Yes.
Right. Right. Well, so to your point of just kind of the tradition, I mean, they are such a tradition, they value the tradition, they understand what it is that they're looking for, right? And they're a close-knit community. Like over there, like I mean, all the trainers know each other. Everyone that runs dogs, they all know each other, and they
Right.
hold each other accountable for, hey, this is what we're striving for. Here, like I probably don't know all the trainers and dog handlers in my county, let alone in the country, right?
Right.
So, and everybody has their own different cup of tea. Like, so for me, like I sometimes I hear people talk about pointing labs, and if you were to ask my opinion, I'm like, well, if I want a lab, I'm getting a lab. If I want a pointer, I'm getting a pointer. Like
Right.
I'm not trying to mix it. To me, like I'm not taking the front end of a Corvette and the back end of a Super Duty and saying, hey, it's the best vehicle ever because it does everything, right? Like
Right.
that's me, right? But we have a way here of this is what kind of boggles my mind. Why does everybody want to be different? Right? Like I don't understand why everybody wants to be different, right? So like somebody that we've trained labs for, this is just an example, train labs for, I trained 2 or 3 labs for this guy, and he called me 6 months ago, and he's like, Josh, like I got this wire hair, and like it's just these dogs are crazy, they're nuts, and I'm just like this is not the dog, right? Like you're a lab person. You are what you want. A lab is the perfect thing. So why'd you go away from a lab? He's like, man, like all my buddies have labs. I just want something different.
Yeah.
Like that's the reason to get a different color car, not to get a breed of a dog. I mean, that's just you have to be honest with yourself, because like in that case, I told him the same thing. That's not the dog's fault, right? The dog is doing exactly what they were bred to do. It's just that it's not the right fit for what you're looking for. So
How much when you have a litter, and it's got to be difficult with you've got, I'm sure, a breeding schedule that those things have bumps in the roads and things don't work out. Your vetting process for customers, I'm sure at this point you have a great customer base, a waiting list. What's your? I don't want, you don't have to go into deep details. Like I don't want to see your contract. Like it's not going to say don't let the puppy swim until it's 12 weeks old or anything. But when a customer finds you, do you do a lot of research into them, or just is it more of like a feeling after you talk to them, like, yeah, this person can talk dog, and is that a tough spot?
Well, so here's what's so interesting about it. So most of the time when people call me, they have a lot of questions for me, right? They're trying to find if my dogs and if I'm the right fit for them. So they're going to ask me,
That's good.
which is great. And I love that conversation. But what I always love is after we get done with that, then they're like, oh, especially if they're like, yeah, I'm really interested. Yeah, I think I want to go ahead and put a deposit. I'm like, hold on a second. Like you've vetted me out. Like it's now my turn, right? Like I get to vet you out now. And there's kind of like well, wait a second, I'm the customer kind of thought sometimes for people. And I afterwards, I think they really appreciate that I care about it. Like I want to know where these dogs are going. Like, are you the right fit for me? Because at the end of the day, I do this with my employees. I'm like, what kind of business are we? We're a dog training business. Nope, we're not. What kind of business are we? Well, we're a puppy business. No, we're not. Okay, what kind of business are we? We're a customer experience business. Like that's at the end of the day what we are. If you were to encompass us into what are we, customer experience. Well, that customer experience for us, the only way that it works is if you are the right client for us, and then we find the right dog for you, right? So if you're like, hey, I really love, Brock is who's one of my studs. I need a Brock puppy. I need this. I need that. And I'm like, you know what? You're a bud puppy person. Like you should get a puppy out of bud. Here's why, right? If you force my hand and you're like, nope, it has to be this, has to be this, has to be this, and then later on you find out like, yeah, this dog is more than what I needed. Like that at the end of it, I feel like that's on me. Like I allowed that to happen, right? Because I didn't say, hey, no, this is the right fit. So there's a lot of trust there. Like what I always ask people to do is trust me. Like I'm not going to steer you the wrong way. I'm truly trying to find the right dog for you. But the right dog is so interesting because, for me, so this is where my wife and I yin and yang so well. For me, I want a high flyer. I want a big motor. I want a dog I can push. I can do great things. I can go accomplish titles I need to. Right. My wife had a really good counter to that as far as like I need to make sure that the home life is going to be great, that the dog's going to have the off switch, the dog's going to be able to handle the kids, that the dogs, and then the things we've had these dogs do. So you could take hunting wise. Okay, so the guy, our clients that dove hunt in Texas are looking for something way different than our clients that pheasant hunt in South Dakota, right? Or our clients that are hunting offshore, like sea duck hunting stuff in like New Jersey, right? Like there's so there's the differences there. But then in the last couple of years, we've had dogs that go on to be cadaver dogs, search and rescue dogs, detection, bomb detection dogs, like all of this stuff. It's like, oh my goodness, like it's endless what they're capable of. But it's all about finding the right dog.
Right. And this is I don't want to say it's a not fair question. If you didn't find those dogs when you went overseas, I feel you probably could have done that with whatever stock you found here too, because you've set a bar for yourself. But
Yeah.
it seems like like what you wanted, what you were hoping for, you could find, but it was more consistent. And it gave you like it's like, I guess if you were a car person, it gave you a better blueprinted motor that you could like I can build a custom car out of that a lot better than I can out of a bad engine. And that's not a good analogy, but
But
I'm sure I'd like to think that somebody who, let's say the guy now who's breeding labs in Kansas for hunters, and he feels just like you do about his dogs, and him and his wife love them, as long as they set the reality goals and they don't do any shortcuts, they'll get that same dog that you're looking for, where you could go to Kansas and go like, wow, you got a heck of a dog there. But
right.
But going over there, it sounds like it kind of kickstarted a little bit for you.
Yeah, and that's probably a really fair point. I mean, I had somebody not too long ago ask me, why can't you ever find a good chocolate lab? Like chocolate labs are they're just idiots. I've never found a good one. But okay, well, I had a good one, like a really good one, a really special one. What I told him was probably right to your point of there's less chocolates, period, than there are yellows than there are blacks, right? So naturally, you're already going to find less good ones.
Right.
And then you just start dwindling down the pie to like what it is. Now you find, okay, you have less chocolates, or you have less yellows, you have less chocolates. Now all of a sudden you're looking for very specific traits, and you're really trying to narrow this down. Like, yeah, of course it's going to be harder. It's going to be more difficult.
Yeah.
So it's just one of those things. You kind of start narrowing down that pie over and over and over again, and it's going to be more difficult. But you can get there. It's just how much time and what are you going to dedicate to it? And the phrase that you used early on, which I loved, was, are you willing to not look through rose-colored glasses?
Yeah.
Are you willing to understand all these dogs have faults? Like, so when somebody comes over to my place and they talk about, they want to see all the dogs. They're expecting me to bring them out, show them off, and tell you how great each one of them is. Okay. And I'll do that, but I'll also tell you each one of the dog's faults, because every dog is going to have one, right? It's just a matter of what fault are you willing to live with? What fault fits you? What fault will you accept? Right. So like, I mentioned that dog, right here, this named Brock. So Brock he is an extreme caliber dog, and he has done some incredible things. I have incredible stories. I won't get into them, but people hear those stories, they see him, they watch him work, and like, I need that puppy. I'm like, well, you probably don't, right? Because one, this is kind of like going to Secretariat, right? Like, so you like, his puppies need to be worked, they need to be worked with. But on the same side of it, or on the other side of it that we don't talk about, this I know because I've trained so many of his puppies now. His puppies are slow developing. So are you willing to sit out that first hunting season with this dog? Right? Are you willing to understand that it's going to take you longer to get there? Like, you're going to get here if you do it right, but it's going to take you longer. You're not going to get here in 10 months, right? It might be a year and a half, 2 years, right? I have one dog right now that's out running field trials down in Chicago that is a puppy out of him. And at 8, 9, 10 months old, like, he was calling, the owner was calling me panicked. Like, I just don't think this is the dog. I don't think he's going to have it. I don't think I'm going to be able to go run this thing. And now I just got a text today with another ribbon of like, look at what he did this weekend. He's so great. It's fantastic. Like, that's a fault. If it's a fault you're willing to live with and accept, awesome. If it's not, then let's look at a different dog.
Right. If you want the dog that's, could run in a competition or a hunt test at 8 months, they exist. But then there's that why, but why? And I have a real bone up my butt from all the years I dedicated to NAVDA. When we started doing it, and NAVDA was way before I started doing it, but in the 25 years that I've been around it, you rarely ever saw a puppy that was maybe 10, 11 months, but usually we can do a puppy up to 16 months of age. And that has flipped ass over tea kettle. People want to, like, I got a 6-month-old dog, I want to run it in the test. Why?
Right.
Why aren't you willing to just spend a year with this dog, give it the best you can give it? And so what if it got its score at 15 months? You're not doing a favor by hurrying up. And when you said about a lab developing slow, that made me think, like, I think the favorite dogs I've had all kind of develop slow. Maybe I was busy in life too. That helps, being busy. But those phenoms that come on early, sure, they could be great through their whole life. They might throw themselves. We don't know. But why is the hurry,
Yeah.
I think that's from when you talk about Scotland. I've probably had maybe 6 interviews with different trainers in England over the years. And every one of them says that we go too fast in America.
Oh, yeah.
Now, what do you think about that statement, Josh? Is that true?
Oh, it's we go too fast with everything, right? It's the Amazon effect. We can add anything we want in the world in a click and 2-day shipping.
Right.
And the reality is that
including a Labrador retriever.
Right. Yeah, it's not the same. And sometimes that's really hard for people to accept that side of it, right? I mean, there is nothing worse for me than coming into hunting season, because everybody, like, probably right about now is like, I need a puppy right now so they can hunt this year. And I'm starting to count, and I'm like, June, July, August, September, like, what? Like, that doesn't make sense. It doesn't work, right? But the thought process that people have is get them now so they can hunt. And it just, like, for me, so I have this thing, I'll talk to you a little bit about it because I think it's fantastic. I don't want to call it controversial, but it's going to kind of shake some thoughts up a little bit. So I do this thing. So being a sports guy, I love sports analogies and sports terms. So I call this red shirting my young dogs. So what I mean by that is I bring them out their first season and they don't get to pick anything up. They have to sit there, they watch, they listen, they desensitize to everything that I can't train them for. Mallards working, geese landing on top of us, all this stuff, right? Calls going off, bunch of hoot and holler. Like, I can't train for all of that, right? So I come back and I bring them into the field and I let them desensitize to it. The hardest thing in the world is when that young dog is sitting there. He's not fully trained, but he's trained, right? Like he's steady. He's delivering a hand. He's whistle stop. He's maybe doing some basic, but he's not done, right? Well, that young dog is sitting there, and that bird splash or drops 10 yards in front of him. He's looking right at it. I want in the worst way to send him, but I don't. And the reason is that if I give that dog, I truly believe that for a waterfall guy now, right? If I give him a year of sitting there watching, I chill him out and I don't get into this go mindset. So when you have, like, all the time we have people that are like, man, like my dog never whines ever during training, but we go out in the blind and we go out in the field and he'll whine, right? So how do I fix it? Well, it was a bad habit that was created because this young puppy or this young dog comes out, and this is different, right? We're not training anymore. We're not in the backyard, right? Like, why are we up at 3:30, right? Why are we in a boat? Why are we in a side by side? Why? Like, what are all these decoys? Everything going on, right? And then all of a sudden, there's quack 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 quack. So he looks over at the duck calls, and then all of a sudden he looks out front, and oh my gosh, there's birds flying, and then their shots go off, and then the birds fall, and then dad or mom says my name and I get to go pick it up. That was the best thing in the world, right? So these puppies get really, really smart really fast, right? So they start going, they hear quack, quack, quack. And they go, oh, wait a second. Last time they did that, I saw birds. And then when I saw birds, shots went off. So all of a sudden there's a break. And the owner's going, whoa, like you've never broke before. Like what the heck's going on? Get over here. And then all of a sudden this dog is so jacked up and so anxious, something happens, which is, right? And the owner's going, well, what the heck, right? But the more you put them in that situation, the more anxious, the more jacked up they get, and then all of a sudden it snowballs into something that should have never been. So that red shirt season for me, like I've just had tremendous success with a young dog sits, honors the older dog working. They're both getting work in. The young dog's not getting feathers in his mouth. But then that next season, I don't go into the following training season and have to undo or fix all these bad habits that naturally a young dog is going to pick up during hunting season. I don't have to fix that. But then we go into year 2 and I have a seasoned pro. He's never picked up a bird, at least not a live bird in the field. And he's a seasoned pro. He's like, got this, boom, here, quiet, calm, collected. And then guess what? Now I can just go apply my training. I've loved doing it.
Josh, it sounds like you want a dog that acts like he's been in the end zone before he makes his first touchdown.
That's right. That's right. Act like you've been there before.
Act like you've been there before. No, like, oh.
Right. I was flinching when you said that because I was like envisioning all my past coaches.
I was the opposite. I did not get into sports, but I love being critical of it. And the same thing with people like my son-in-law, my daughter and son-in-law, they're boys. I think last year they put them in T-ball. Now, of course, I was born in 1957. There was no T-ball. You got to play Little League when you were old enough to take your bike by yourself and go to the ballpark, where we could play Little League. Like your parents didn't have anything to do with it. And now parents want their kids playing T-ball. They can't even actually catch a ball yet. They can't hit a pitch yet. But gosh darn it, they can hit a ball off of a tee. Big freaking doopy. Right? Wait. So the same thing. A dog can be a very immature creature, just like people can. I mean, it's probably is close. It's probably a 1-to-7 ratio. As they always used to say, 7 years for a dog. So a 1-year-old dog is like a 7-year-old kid. You don't ask a lot of it, but if you structure it, then he acts like he's like he's in the old days. He acts like he's been in a church before and he could be quiet. Like when I started bringing my kids to church, like I'm not super religious or anything like that, but we forced our kids to join church because our parents did it to us, and then we all quit going to church when they got to be 8 teenagers. But what was ridiculous was the church we found in Michigan had a crying room where there was a speaker in there so you could hear the sermon and hear the songs, but it was a glass crying room. So when you had kids that couldn't sit patiently, the parents had to walk over. It was like the collar of shame. Right? Well, they're bringing kids that weren't ready. But how did my parents get me ready for church? They had structure and they had behavioral things they only accept before they ever took you in public. And the same
Right.
thing, I've never heard anybody say that they took a dog on a hunt and the dog was basically on a chain gang, like, which is that from the field trial world. That's a heck of a tool for a dog to learn impulse control. It's like, it's not my turn.
That's exactly right. Yeah,
And
there's a lot to
during
be said about
training,
the
you
dogs,
give him turns, but now you took him to the game. It's just not his turn. And they can do I don't say can do, they will always do better if you could do that. But we're in America. We're the wild. That's why Europe calls us the Wild West, because, and now, like I said, we got Amazon and 1-day delivery. It's not going to get easier for you breeders. And you
No, that's right. That's right. Yeah, Amazon has trained us all really well.
like freaking Jeff Bezos. God bless. What do you see? Was there any? Probably just touch on a few things here. People talk about the size difference. Is there a true size difference, English and American, or is there just some oversized Americans? When I say, breeding wise.
Yeah, there's really not, so like when I hear people say, "Oh yeah, those British labs are short, stocky,"
Right.
that's not it. Not it at all. Like you can have like, yeah, there's maybe like more of like an English show style, but
Sure.
I would say the American show style is very much that way too, right? If you ever seen the
Right.
Labrador at the Westminster, I mean, it's not the Labrador that you're seeing out there competing either, right? So it's the same thing. Again, they're both Labradors. So for me, what I'm looking for in a lab is probably very similar to what a buddy of mine down the road is going to be looking for as his gun dog in an American lab, right? As far as I want the athleticism, I want the size, so I have dogs that are 72 to 74 pounds. Now I keep my dogs lean, right? So they're not overweight. Now, if you get them overweight, they're going to be in the 80s, plus. But
Sure.
I personally like a bigger dog because where I hunt a lot of flooded timber in Arkansas. A leggier dog, that can fight through the trash better. Splash water becomes lunge water, becomes swim water, way easier for a leggier dog than a shorter dog, right?
Sure.
My wife upland hunts like crazy. She loves a more compact, smaller, a little more agile dog, for her. So we have both sides of that. We have, some males. We have one of our males, I want to say, is right around 60, 60-ish. And then our biggest would be in that 74, 75 range.
Right.
So I don't love the 100-pound labs, right? Because one, I think most 100-pound labs are probably overweight, right?
Yeah.
If we were to be really honest with
Yeah,
ourselves.
let's be honest.
Yeah.
For fat,
Right.
for fat,
Yeah,
we said
right.
it. We said it. We said fat dog.
Right.
Okay?
Well,
We said
so here's what's so funny, Ron. I think this is comical. So when we watch people at the kennel get out of their car and we've never met them, never met their dog, it is unbelievable how often the dog matches the person. You get this skinny, energetic guy is like, "Hey guys, how's it going? What are we doing? Hey, I got to get out of here." That dog comes in like, and then all of a sudden you get a guy that he's overweight. He kind of takes his time strolling down the sidewalk, opens the door, kind of slower talking. That dog gets out. He looks like a beer keg with legs, and he kind of stumbles into it. It is really interesting how often our dogs are a reflection of us. But I think that speaks volumes to they're a product for their environment, right? I mean, they really are. Yeah, you could take a dog that's the best bred dog in the world, mishandle them, and feed them wrong, and not work with them. Well, that dog is not ever going to live up to the potential that was bred into them.
they could probably take, let's say you had a litter coming this month and you had a pick after 6 months. You was like, boy, this one is probably going to, let's just say, is heading toward the breeding program later on, and sell it to the wrong person. And it could be overweight, barking the blind. It's still about all the work you have to put into the dog. You got the traits there, the genetics. You can screw up anything. You can not change your oil in a car and blow the engine, right?
That's right.
Yeah. And on top of that, here's the part I always love about dogs too. I just interviewed a couple of brothers that immigrated from Cuba to the States. And he got a German short hair. He fell in love with hunting through a couple of teachers at his high school.
Hmm.
went pheasant hunting on, in Jersey, it's well, like Wisconsin does, Illinois does, Michigan's starting to do, they have state released birds. But it's a great, that's where I started in Illinois. I started on state released birds. And he fell in love with it so much that him and I think it was his fiance at the time, on the way home from just a walk-up hunt with no dog, he said, "We got to get a dog." She said yes. And they started Googling, and they started with $400 German short hairs. It was a Amish puppy mill. The guy didn't answer the phone. So they went to the next price range, which was 500. And I got to see this dog and I got to judge it in a mock test three or 4 weeks ago. Sometimes the best boxer in the world never stepped into a ring, right?
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
It could be like, wait a minute, where did you get that dog from? But that's the genetics coming through. The genetics don't lie, but it's your job to try to use those genetics and get the right person. But you also can't be a breeder. I shouldn't say this because I've never asked you this. I wouldn't want a breeder to say, "Oh, you don't hunt enough."
Right.
I mean, people have jobs and lives. How many people get to hunt as much as people that are immersed in the dog world? So then you got that level. It's like, so we got to have a cooperative dog, or as you call it, trainable, but what did you? I say cooperation, but it's the same thing. Team player.
Team player.
You gotta sell that person a team player dog, and you cannot worry about the fact that, oh, that poor dog's only going to go on one big trip, because that's the reality of sporting dogs in this country. They don't all get to train all year. They don't get to hunt all year. So, but if you've got the traits and the temperament, the dog doesn't care. He'll watch TV. They will. Yeah,
that's right. I'm right there with you, Ron. I mean, the reality is, when I ask people, how many days a year do you hunt? I'm just trying to ask you questions so I can better understand you and what you're looking for. And I would say over 90% of the time, that answer is not as much as I would like to. I mean, it's the truth, right? I mean, and again, like I talked early on in this about, my family life. I mean, my family life is drastically changing how I approach, my job, my career, but my everyday life, right? So I'm really close to a lot of the retriever clubs in my area. I try to donate as much to them, help them, because I appreciate what they do as far as the tests and events that they put on.
Mhm.
But I'm showing up less and less. Like last year, there were 2 tests. Like I can't remember the last time I missed them. I missed both of them.
No.
And so they call me like, "Hey, are you okay? What's going on?" I'm like, "Yeah, I just didn't want to miss another weekend with my kids."
Right.
I mean, like that's a big deal. My family life is important to me.
And your customers are in the same boat as you are.
That's exactly it. All of us want to hunt more, but the reality is that our dogs, almost without exception, are going to be family members first and hunting dogs second.
Yeah.
Like we just don't find people anymore that, like when I was growing up, my grandfather had a big chocolate lab named Warden. It was the first dog I had ever hunted with. He wasn't much of a hunter. He wasn't steady. He never retrieved. He'd go take the bird off and go chew on it by himself. Like that was our hunting dog, right? But I remember my grandpa telling me when I was a little kid, he had an outdoor kennel for Warden. And he told me, he said, don't screw around with him because he's a hunting dog. You're going to mess him up if you play with him. Right. That was the old school thought. Right.
Oh, yeah.
My grandpa lays in bed with a dog at night today. Like society has changed so much. But that's why I think the breeding has changed so much. Like we don't see the dogs anymore that are, 2x4 dogs. You got to hit him over the head with a 2x4 to make them pay attention. We don't see that anymore. If you're not you're going to see, if you came to see my dogs, they're going to be big motors. They're going to be hard charging, going to be all this stuff. If you hit one of them over the head with a 2x4, they would completely melt down and shut down.
Yeah,
right?
They'd be like,
right. So they have it, but they're not that temperament. But it's also the same temperament that can go lay in bed with my kids at night, which is really important.
Yeah, it's a heck of a journey, And now, when you said you are a real sports person, competitive, you're going to be having soccer coming up, or basketball, or wrestling. What you're in for it there, Josh.
Yeah, I know it. Well, I'll tell you my real kind of my hobby right now. So I'm really big into roping, like tie down roping, team roping, which is a very expensive thing to get into, not only for myself, but now my daughter, wants her own horse, right? And now my son. So my son, he has no fear. He's 2.5 years old, but the other night we were practicing roping and tying calves and everything like that, and this kid just runs up and wants to jump on and tie these calves. So he wants to be on. Like, he got his first shiner that night. He's pretty proud of it. He went and walked into his school, and teachers wanted to show him his shiner that he got. But it's yeah. So we're gonna be all over the place, depending on what's going on. But that is like that to me. That's exactly what we go back to when we talked about finding the right dog for you,
Right.
just how they fit into your life, right? So like if you would have talked to me 5 6 years ago, I would have talked a lot about competing. I would have talked about how I want to be competitive. And it's not that I don't want that anymore. I do. Like, I think it's very important to title my dogs and prove it as I'm saying and all that. But like, I am seeing more and more from a client perspective too. Like, my family is incredibly important to me, and that has to be a priority when I'm bringing the right dog in. They have to be
Yeah.
the right dog for everybody, not just me.
Yeah. And like I said, the older your family gets, the better you're going to be able to do that. Because you're going to be like, yeah, I'm there. One of these days, you're going to find some dad come over with kids your age. He's like, I'm not going to get to hunt that much. Neither am I.
Right.
But as long as you don't lose sight of what you're selling and what you're producing. I mean, that's a dog that I've never owned, but it's a dog. I mean, like, who in the world doesn't like just love a lab? I mean, it's why it was the most popular dog. But what you've done, it's pretty impressive. It really is. I don't know that I could interview a lot of people that would be that honest about what they do and how they do it. And even saying, like, whatever you hunted last year, you're going to hunt a little less next year.
Right.
But I think people can also take something away from it and say, yeah, most people only get so much vacation, so many weekends. But getting involved in the dog sports, just the hunt test, or if you want a trial, that extends you can get the kids involved in that, and the dogs literally, there's no dog that wants to sit out 9 months a year. So,
That's right.
You'll probably be in team roping. I'm gonna guess maybe jujitsu later. One, I'm only hoping because that's my thing.
That's great.
But keeping the dogs in the forefront of the kids too.
For sure.
How
Yeah.
long before your daughter handles a dog in the test? Then how long before you let her go? Because that's pretty young age.
Yeah. I actually think she's been practicing. So even this week, whenever she gets the opportunity, if I'm training late, my wife will pick them up from school and come out to wherever I'm training, and they get to come run their dog. So they each have one that's like their dog.
Right.
And she really has been practicing. And I told her if she got to the point that she was proficient at it, that she could do it. She wants a ribbon. Like that, that's all she cares about. She
Just
just
a
wants a
ribbon.
ribbon. Yeah. So so of all the ribbons in all the years that I've ever gotten, so if you can see in my office, Ryan, I don't think anybody else can, but you can see I have one stack of ribbons here. I have literally totes full of
Sure.
ribbons.
Sure.
This is the only one that I've kept because this was my first dog that I put all the way through and titled all the way through. I don't know. That first one was sentimental to me. Like, after
Right.
that, a ribbon's a ribbon. But she
Right.
came in my office one day and she's looking at him and she's like, "Can I have one of these?" And I was like, "Well, if you earn one, you can." And how do I earn one? Okay, so now she's driven on it. The hard part is it's going to hold me back from titling this young dog of hers that is a really nice young dog. So again, family life, I'm going to have to understand how to handle that. And, I'm probably just going to have to delay my expectation of when I would hope that he's titled, because if she's running him and even half, the days, that's half the days I don't get to.
Right.
And, but here's the thing. So like, if that gets her into this, and if that gets it to where she's loving being around this, it
Yeah.
introduces her into this, that is extremely valuable to me. I mean, this makes it to where my lifestyle isn't a burden. My lifestyle this is who we are. And I think that's
Right.
very.
Yeah, and dogs are a great way to do that. It's not like you opened up a body shop and you're asking your daughter to learn how to tin knock, and
Right.
there's that's not a bad it's not a bad parental sacrifice slash possible future path to take. Yeah.
Right.
You might be we mentioned Delmer Smith before. You might be the Smith family coming up. Who knows? Are you familiar with Jordan Horick? Do you know Jordan?
I do know Jordan. Yep.
And I went up there with Taffy, my little Cocker Spaniel, and his daughter, like I think he's got 4 kids, I think, maybe 3 or 4. There was a bunch of them, and I loved it. Their kids just out playing in the fields and kind of like the way I grew up. And but the one daughter just sticks to him like glue, and she's handling the dogs, and we got video of her like ever since she was little. She's just like, and he never wanted her to do it. She just wanted to.
Yeah.
So
Those dogs, especially if you get the right dog that connects with the kid, it's just amazing the impact that they can have on them. I mean,
yeah.
for me, Solo is my daughter's dog's name, and the confidence that I want. I mean, this is more of a reserved little girl. The confidence she has when she is with him is
Mhm.
it's a pretty fascinating thing to
Yeah.
watch.
Well, Josh, I could probably go on for another couple hours, and if you don't mind, I'm going to have you come on again. But the last thing I wanted to ask was, I shouldn't even say it's an ask. When we say British versus American, I almost wish we could find another 2 words for it.
Mhm.
You know, you found what you were looking for there, but you still wanted what you wanted here. Like you wanted what you saw the best of here, but then you saw the dog. I mean, it's such a blanket statement. Is it literally a better off switch? I mean, that's even not fair to say it, but it almost sounds like, or is it that they're so traditional in their training and so regimented that it's really about if the genetics are there, it's what you ask of the dog.
Yeah, I think it really is more of the traits in which they're looking for and how we can apply that here in what we're looking for.
Right.
Because, like I said, you can find the nut jobs that are barkers and hard mouth and everything
Yeah.
else over there too. Just like you could find the other side over here. I really value the tradition and what they're looking for and the why behind why they're looking for it. I think that's why it draws me over there so much. But
Yeah.
but yeah, they're you find the right ones, it's really hard to beat them. They're a really special dog.
Yeah. Well, there's a reason why it's so popular.
That's right.
All right, Josh, I'm going to stop this. I want to talk to you about something for a second, but I really appreciate your time, and I think I think we taught some people some things. I think.
Yeah,
In other
uh,
words,
yeah, that's
don't be
great.
in a, don't be in a hurry. Find a breeder that you can converse with, because there's a lot of breeders that just don't have the time. And think about what you're going to do with the dog, and do your research. And it's not that big of an obstacle, but you just got to do a little due diligence.
That's right. That's right. You hit it right on the head.
All right, let me stop this little booger.